Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me for a second year. I consider this to be quite an honor. So, you know, a lot of times, your conference organizers, Leslie Fairstein and Stella, thank you for invited me to discuss the gift of age. And a lot of times I think I have a reputation for bringing a very positive, very empowered, and always impassioned perspective to bear. And today, I have some kind of serious notes with which I will be interspersing that discourse. This is a different talk than anybody in the room has ever heard me give because I just wrote it. So I mean, well, let me say this. If you've heard me give it, we've got a problem because it means that I just wrote it again. But I think I just wrote it for the first time. It is my belief that I just wrote it for the first time. So Fanny, if you have the recording bandwidth, it's worth it. She's designing my website, so it's like when we get some juicy content, I always like her to be the first to know. So, you know, aging is indeed a gift, but like all gifts, it is differentially bestowed. And today, I want to talk a little bit about the implications of the gift and the differential, both. So in the context of older workers, people working well old, you know, very, very, very radical act, there's an ideological divide about what this means and what is the cause of this phenomenon. And on the left, there's an argument that we have all bought in to a neoliberal plot where society is not providing adequate pensions, public or private, adequate workplace assurance, and instead of organizing and fighting for workers' rights, we have, you know, drunk the Kool-Aid, hook, line, and sinker, and decided that there's something wrong with us, and we need to fix ourselves, and it's a perfectly reasonable thing that lots of older people have to work. Now, this is one extreme position. I'm not representing my own position. I'm watching you all like frown. It's like, what team does she play for? But we need to be conscious of what is going on always around us. So then, at the other extreme, you have the proponents of quote unquote productive aging, right? And track that word, productive aging. It's not good aging, it's not happy aging, it's not successful aging, though there's also that. It's not aging well, it's productive aging, right? And that has real political implications and the ways that it's measured. Very, very strongly privileged, paid employment, caregiving, paid and unpaid employment. But from the productive aging side, you get an equally sort of preposterous extreme where everybody should be working. It's good for their health. It's good for the health of the economy. It's good for the health of society. It's good for the health of employers. Well, anytime you've got some people saying nobody should be doing this and some people saying everybody should be doing this, you should be dubious, because that's never right. You know, it's never right that everybody and nobody should be doing anything. Well, maybe a few things, and we'll come to them. We'll come to them in this wide-ranging talk. But my position is that it's offensive to have to engage the question of working while old in those terms. Let's stop and think for a minute. So raise a hand if you are currently working for yourself, for somebody else, you know, in the paid employment sector. Leave your hands up. This is good exercise. Anyway, leave your hands up, okay? Because now you're going to start doing some more things. Now, with your hands up, everybody who is working only because they want to. Money plays no role in it. Having to do it plays no role in it. You're working only because you want to. Stand up. Okay, so let's hit those people for money later. But okay, you see that's a few people. Now, everybody, keep your hands up. You dropped your hands. Everybody who is working only because they need to. They hate it. They get no satisfaction from it. It doesn't feed anything. All it does is you have to do it for a paycheck, for the insurance, for the something or other. You guys stand up.
Oh boy.
That's fine. There's not, this is not, no, sit back down, I'm sorry. This is not, you can put your hands down. This is not to humiliate anybody. Do we ask younger people to define and justify what they're doing in the workplace in this way? Ever? Do we use these kinds of categories for other kinds of workers? Ever? Well, ever is kind of interesting. I started to think about my mother. I just turned 65, so to give you a sense of the generation that we're talking about. So my mother divorced very, very young and very ahead of the curve. She divorced in the mid-50s. And she had to work. She was a divorcee. She had to work. And people felt sorry for us. And they provided a lot of support for her to raise her child when the institutions weren't set up for mothers to work and raise your child. For example, my elementary school sent everybody home for lunch, had no cafeteria. There was no capacity. You had to go home in the middle of the day at the age of 5, at the age of 6, 7, 8, and to an empty house, not so perfect. And so friends invited me to lunch, and there were some informal arrangements. And then my mother remarried. And she kept working. But she didn't have to work anymore. She wanted to. And the way they talked about her and her working and my being an abandoned latchkey child was completely different, because the judgment about whether women should be in the workplace voluntarily was very different. This is the point where we are about working while old. and especially working as aging women, right? We're sort of both, we're kind of breaking taboos. We're kind of being kind of brazen women for doing that, especially if we want to be doing it, rather than just need to be doing it. So, that's that uncomfortable place where we are. But yet, we're in that uncomfortable place, and there are these really unequivocal benefits of experienced workers, right? I'm gonna try not to spend all morning talking about them because they're so self-evident. But I am knocking over the power. I'm not using experienced as a euphemism for older here. I'm using language very carefully. The benefits that I'm about to recite aren't benefits of experience. The thing is that experience and age go together very directly and necessarily. You can't actually get experience without the passage of time. But I do not believe it serves us well in combating aging stereotyping, negative aging stereotyping, which we're going to talk about at some length, by replacing it with positive aging stereotyping. We do not magically beatify because we're old. We do not become saintly. We do not become popely. We do not become godly. We're the same people we were when we were younger, just more, right? And so that means that some of us who were always saintly are, and others of us who were always venal are, and some of us who were like marginally competent or maybe marginally more competent because we've had more experience, and so on and so on. But it's not useful for us to start putting out a bunch of stereotypes of our own. You're then, you're fighting in the mud, and you're only going to lose because they're never right for everybody, right? So let's talk about experience, which travels with age, right? You can be aged and not experienced, but you can't be experienced without getting some age on you, right? Because it's just time. So here are the benefits of an experienced worker. Whatever it is, it's happened before. So there is no failure of system, no change of priority, no, contradiction in message, no anything that they haven't seen before and sort of can draw on a bank of, these are the things that I responded to this with last time that worked horribly, and these are the things that were somewhat more successful. That's the nature of experience. You've made a lot of mistakes, and so then you know what has some reasonable chance of success. Similarly, whoever is performing badly, we have seen that before, right? So that there is no kind of bad behavior in the workplace that we have not had the privilege of experiencing before. And again, it's not that we're saintly and don't care, and it's not that we're magical. It's that we have a bigger toolbox and a little more data about what are the things that we did that were helpful, and what are the things that we did that weren't helpful, and that comes from experience. Then, as everybody in this room knows, one of the most sort of vicious and pernicious negative aging stereotypes is that, maybe once we were good, but now we can't learn new things, right? We can't learn the old dog, new tricks. Can't do it. Here's what is actually true. You have to learn how to learn in your life, right? It is true that we pop out of the womb knowing how to learn. Infants are the best scientists ever. Really pay attention to a baby figuring out their world. But after the world sort of sorts and we get this is actually me and this is actually you, and if I turn my head, you're still here, and all that kind of really Piaget basic and critically important stuff done, then to learn more stuff, we have to figure out for ourselves how we learn. Right? And this is where people say, oh, I'm a visual learner and I'm an auditory learner. And it took me several graduate schools to figure out that if I could condense the entire content of the course onto a page, I owned it. And it wasn't because I wrote really small. It was because, I had it down to, what are the big ideas, and then I can derive the little ones. But that's not the system that works for everybody. That's how I learn. Somebody else learns in a different way. So, in sharp contrast to your older worker can't learn new things, actually, bring it on. Your older worker presented with a new skill, a new situation, new information, can figure out how will I best incorporate this material. And given the flexibility and the opportunity to tailor a learning process to meet our individual needs, research is unequivocal and clear. We own it, right? We own it. There is the old dog, new tricks thing is not true until much later in life when you start losing some of your fluid intelligence and relying more on your crystallized intelligence. So that's how come my mother, who is a brilliant psychoanalyst, but can't be sure if she's had lunch, right, can speak absolutely mind-blowingly about psychoanalysis, but is locked out of her mailbox because the key won't work, because this is what's in her crystallized intelligence is the entire corpus of psychoanalysis. And unfortunately, her fluid intelligence required her to master a new and very irritating, let me say, key, as the one who has to go to Philadelphia and work the key. But that is not while we're working. My mom is 90, and this is a new development. And it's true that these things develop at different times for different people, and they're not inevitable, and at different degrees of seriousness. But this isn't what they're worrying about. They're worrying about you know what you know, and you don't want to learn anything else, and you really can't learn anything else, and that's actually bullshit. So the other thing about an experienced worker that's so critical is that we can tell the difference between the big stuff and the small stuff. And this is actually one of the things that you don't get for quite a while. I mean, I run a center, and I sit at my desk, or lay at my desk sometimes, and several times a week, I say to myself, man, if this had happened just 5 years ago, I would currently be frothing at the mouth. I'd be hysterical. I'd be crazy. But now I know, okay, this person has to assert their power in this way, and the easiest way to make this pass is simply to take a little half step to the right and let them have their moment in the sun, and then they're going to move on to the next thing, and I'm still going to be right here, and everything's actually under control. And honest to God, I save myself so much stress. Like, I come home spitting mad so many fewer days than I used to, right? Other people have this experience. Why? Because you know the big stuff from the small stuff. And how much energy do we put trying to mentor our younger colleagues to get to that point quicker? And I'm very interested in speaking with those people who have success in doing that, because I have none. It's just like they are going to froth at the mouth. I've had no success at that. We also have the experience of working productively and effectively through periods of pain and uncertainty. This is something you don't get except by experience. It's, again, the sort of big stuff, small stuff. And, you know, I am not at all interested in the game called millennial bashing at all. But I was caught, nonetheless, by a recent article suggesting that more than half of people in that generation had left a job for mental health distress of one kind or another. Now, I'm not interested in minimizing the mental health distress that anybody experiences. That's not my point at all. My point is, most of us just keep working through that mental health distress. Now, is that the right answer? I'm not completely sure. You know, you're talking to the woman who stormed around all summer on a fractured hip because I just couldn't assimilate the idea that it wasn't a mind over matter situation and that I couldn't just tough it out through the fractured hip. And that, you would say, is probably like a little bit more working through the pain than is like the perfectly balanced optimum. But it's, as an employer, as a person who runs a center, you know, give me the people who say, yes, I'm uncomfortable. Yes, I'm not quite sure what direction this is going. And yes, I'm not feeling my best. But let's do it, you know, right? Let's do it. And things should resolve. Similarly, we can see when someone's making a mistake. This goes back to there's pretty much nothing we haven't seen. We've seen it before. We recognize they're making a mistake because we've seen people make this mistake before. We don't all have the ability to give people feedback in a way that they can use, but some of us do. And all of us recognize the mistake. And then some of us say big stuff, small stuff. No, it's small stuff, I'm staying out of it. But some of us are able to offer constructive feedback. And what is that? That's, again, experience. Oh, no. What time am I supposed to stop, Stella? Oh, for God's sakes. So I'm gonna talk way faster because there's some really important stuff I want to talk about.
You dropping knowledge.
What?
Give me some more.
And verbs. So clearly, given all these amazing strengths, with this booming economy and the workforce shortages and the low unemployment, you're all fielding more employment offers than you can even respond to, correct? Right? Everybody but me. I just figure it's like, the word is out about my hip, so I'm not, but the rest of you are, right? Or maybe not so much? Yeah, less of that than, So why is that, right? First of all, is just ageism, gendered ageism. That the stereotypes, right, their stereotypes, the negative stereotypes, that we're slower, that we're dumber, that we're rigid, and that we're expensive, right? And get along poorly with others, to boot, and aren't cute, to boot, right? Those are those ageist stereotypes. But now let me say something difficult to you. And I said this last year. This is the one piece of repetition, I think, unless I've forgotten. We reinforce that ageism when we hide our age. So when we are competent and effective workers, but we're putting a whole lot of energy into, I'm sorry, there's some beautiful hairdos in this room, but when we are putting a lot of energy into dyeing the gray out of our hair, into dressing as if we were much younger than we are, into excruciating routines in the gym to allow us to wear the clothes that allow us to dress as if we were much younger than we are, doing our Botox and our plastic surgery and whatever other viruses they're infecting into, injecting into our faces. We make it that much more difficult for those people who cannot or will not hide their age. So the problem with doing that, we all have every right to look exactly like we want to look. Present ourselves, like I'm not the one who's going to stand up here and say, don't present yourself to the male gaze, don't this, don't that. Do whatever the hell you please. But recognize that everybody does not have the ability to go through that sort of transformation that some people do. And it makes it harder for them because then people think they're old. And they think these guys aren't old, and that makes it more difficult. I have a wonderful cohort of aging people, aging experts, women from around the world. And we were at, some meeting, and we could perhaps have had a lot to eat and drink. When we made a pact to stop dyeing our hair. Because every last one of us was grayish. Some of us were full gray and some of us were some gray. And 2/3 of us were dyeing our hair. And we sort of said, let's stop. Let's just stop. Now, come on. how privileged. I mean, I'm not saying so everybody should do what we did. You know, what are we? We're a bunch of academics. Furthermore, we're a bunch of academics at sort of the peak of our careers. Furthermore, we have every privilege in the world, and if we want to stop dyeing our hair, we stop dyeing our hair. But the point that I'm making is to think about how do our actions influence those people who can't take those actions. You know, I did work in HIV for a long time when I was young, and the crisis was young. And I went to my health commissioner, who was an African-American man, and I said, you know, confidentiality, HIV, confidentiality, it's a critical thing. We've got to protect it, and this law, and this law, and this law. And he looked at me and he said, confidentiality is not the point. Protection against discrimination is the point. And I was like, this is a very, very, very important point. And come out about your age, it makes, you know, come out, obviously. I'm playing on the LGBT. Well, let's think a little bit about the business of people jumping up and saying, I don't want a bunch of queers teaching my children. Well, sweetheart, your children have been being taught by LGBTQ and all the other initials we can tack on there, people since they entered the first level of preschool through when they graduated at the highest level of postgraduate thing. It's just they used to be closeted. And so now, when people aren't closeted, they suddenly are having to fight an old, and worthless fight. I've beat that point beyond to death. So remember, we're making a list of how come people aren't beating down your door to give you new job offers. So there's ageism, which we do things that reinforce. There is also the weakening of worker strength and agency and protections, which is one of the key things that has created the growth of the gig economy. And I'm sure that some of you are thriving in the gig economy, and I'm sure some others of you aren't thriving in the gig economy. But the fact of the matter is that it's changed the terms of employment a lot, and workers have less power and are more dispensable and fungible and so on, even in a talent shortage, because we can get ourselves some just-in-time talent, you know, and don't have to worry about engaging and retaining and caring for our long-term talent, because if they can hack it, they can go. But even though I'm imposing on the goodwill of your time, I have to cycle back to this idea of differentially bestowed gifts. Okay? And the fact is, if this gift of age were differentially bestowed in a random way, like you got it, you didn't, you got it, you didn't, it would be like it, you know, it's like all the rest of the bad things in the world. Some get it, some don't. But it's not. It's in a pattern. And it's in a pattern that follows very closely a whole set of other patterns. So much so that I've been working inside of a framework that is called cumulative disadvantage, which is about the idea that those groups not every individual within those groups, but those groups who are disadvantaged in society, those disadvantages accumulate over their life course, and people are more different, the advantaged from the disadvantaged, at the age of 65 or at 70 than they were at 5. Because it just keeps adding up. The good stuff just keeps adding up, or the bad stuff just keeps adding up. So, the good stuff is got to go to a good school, had really good health to start with, and then had good health care when things went wrong. When my mom had to work, all my friends stepped up to give me lunch. Got to go to camp, got options about where to apply to school, got to go to a wonderful university when I had mentors along the way in my career. They got better and better and better, which is not to say nothing bad ever happened, but overall, on a population level, the evidence is very clear that those people that are aging really healthily and happily and effectively didn't just get good when they got old. They've had pretty good lives. At the same time, those people whose lives have been challenging for a long time, right? Whose lives have featured less good health care, more interaction with the criminal justice system, far less good education, neighborhoods with less safety and security and, connectedness and so on, become progressively more disadvantaged through time. It's cumulative advantage and cumulative disadvantage. And I'm not going to insult the intelligence of anyone in the room by asking you to imagine the demographic characteristics by which these patterns sort, because they correspond to the patterns that are sorting people up one side and down the other in this society, unless we are aggressively working through a policy process to change that. And so the upshot in the world of work is that you are more likely to be working for the love of it if you're educated and white and live in a good neighborhood. And furthermore, more able to be finding that work in some way than if you're a woman of color who has less education and who needs to be working because of an array of life circumstances that has made it absolutely impossible that you have enough money to live on, because it ain't Social Security, don't even go there, and are unlikely to be able to. So I'm almost done. Stella, where is she? She's like starting to pull her hair out. 3 minutes? Her beautiful. 3 minutes? So what are our jobs about this? What are our responsibilities? Are these natural laws that cannot be changed? No. Do these have to do with some, biological or other, difficult to change characteristics of populations? No. If anybody received that impression, I'm way off my game. So what are our jobs? In my opinion, number one is to come out about our age, 65. Applying for Medicare. Doesn't seem like I'm gonna get it at this rate, but I'm sure something will change that. Build workplace cultures of inclusivity. And inclusivity does not just mean including you. It means including everybody, particularly people who are different than you, right? It is not an inclusive work culture when you make it safe to be you. That, I'll just leave that one there. Learn to listen and learn from people who have different life experiences than you do. You don't know what they know. They know different stuff than you. And you will know more and be better if you shut up and let them tell you about it. Don't jump right in and say, oh, that's just like. No, it isn't. Just hush. Be still. Let people talk. And by doing that, learn more about your own privilege. The system of racism and exclusion that we have in this country has two sides. There are people benefiting from the distress, oppression, and exploitation of other people. And we each need to interrogate ourselves to understand how we have privileges that others lack and what assumptions that makes about what others can do, what degrees of freedom they have. And that's our work. Like, it's not your work to do the other person's work. It's your work to do your work about you. It's so anytime you're telling other people how they need to change, you maybe want to check yourself and think a little bit, how do I need to change? And now I'm just going to be a little moralizing, and that's my sign to get off the stage. The hook will be there. But we have a responsibility not to allow this erosion of respect and dignity and the love of truth and learning and the appreciation of difference that is infecting the world to infect us. We have to be beacons of, it doesn't have to be this way. It's been different from this in some ways in the past. And we cannot lecture, as I'm lecturing you, young people and get them to understand this. The only way that they have a snowball's chance of understanding this is if we act that way. So we have to act in an ethical way, in a respectful of difference way, in a demonstrating the love of knowledge and learning way, in an open to being corrected and to learning new things way, because people observe what you do. They do not retain what you say. Thank you.